When a Tesla hits 100,000 miles, most owners assume the big concern is the battery. That is what everyone talks about: range loss, degradation, expensive replacements. But after working on these cars for years, I can tell you that is not what usually sends them into the shop. It is something much simpler and much more predictable. Today, I am going to walk you through the exact checklist I would go through on any Tesla at 100,000 miles. These are the things that actually matter if you want the car to feel tight, reliable, and problem-free for the next 100,000 miles. And there is one item on this list that fails so often, I check it before I even think about the battery. Let us start with something most owners never look at: the invisible check. Every Tesla has a built-in service mode. It's not something Tesla advertises much, but it gives you access to system-level data you can't see anywhere else. At 100,000 miles, I'm not just looking for error codes. I'm looking at how the system behaves: coolant flow, thermal consistency, how quickly the system stabilizes under load. The cooling system in a Tesla is doing constant work. It's managing battery temperature, motor temperature, power electronics, even during charging. And here is the part most people miss. When this system starts to degrade, it doesn't fail all at once. It gets less efficient first. Maybe the car takes longer to cool the battery. Maybe fast charging slows down slightly. Maybe the fans run more often than they used to. These are early signs. If you catch it here, you're dealing with a small fix. If you ignore it, that's when it turns into something expensive. Now let's talk about the part that actually wears out the most: the suspension. If you have ever heard a creaking sound when turning slowly, especially in a parking lot, that is usually the first warning. Upper control arms are often the culprit. This is without question the most common issue I see around 100,000 miles. These cars are heavy. A Model 3 is already heavier than most sedans. A Model Y is closer to an SUV in weight, and you feel that over time. Every time you accelerate, that instant torque loads the suspension. Every bump, every turn, every uneven road, it all adds up. What starts as a small bushing wearing out turns into play in the joint. And then you start hearing noise. If you ignore it, it does not stay a small problem. It starts affecting alignment, which affects tire wear, which affects how the car drives. I have had customers come in thinking they needed new tires, and the real issue was worn suspension components causing uneven wear. The signs are simple: creaking at low speeds, a slightly loose or vague steering feel, tires wearing unevenly even after rotation. Fix it early, and it is straightforward. Wait too long, and now you are replacing multiple components at once. Now, let's talk about something that ties directly into that: tires and alignment. At 100,000 miles, most Teslas have already gone through at least 2 sets of tires, sometimes 3. But what I see a lot is uneven wear that gets blamed on the tires themselves. These cars eat rear tires faster than people expect. Instant torque, rear bias, and weight all play a role. But alignment is the bigger factor. If the alignment is even slightly off, you will burn through a set of tires much faster than you should. I always recommend checking alignment around this mileage, even if the car feels fine. Once you see uneven wear, the damage is already done. Tires on these cars are not cheap. This is one of those areas where a small check saves you real money. Now let us get to the one everyone worries about: the battery. Tesla actually gives you a built-in way to check its health. and most owners never use it. You can run a full battery health test through the service menu. It takes several hours, usually overnight, and it gives you a much clearer picture than just looking at the range estimate on the screen. At 100,000 miles, most batteries are still in very good shape. It is normal to see around 85 to 90% of original capacity. That sounds like a big drop, but in real driving, it is not as noticeable as people think. What matters more is consistency. Is the range stable or is it dropping quickly? Is charging behavior normal or does it fluctuate? Those are the things I pay attention to, because a steady battery at 85% is far better than an inconsistent one at 90%. Now, let us go through a couple of simple things that prevent the most frustrating problems. First, the 12-volt battery. If it hasn't been replaced yet, this is where I would do it without thinking twice. This battery powers the systems that allow the car to wake up, unlock, and operate normally. When it fails, the car can become completely unresponsive, and it usually happens without much warning. I've seen people stranded in parking lots, driveways, and at charging stations. It's not an expensive part, but it causes one of the most inconvenient failures you can have. Replacing it proactively avoids all of that. Next, the charge port. This one takes a couple of minutes, but it's worth checking. Over time, debris can build up on the pins, dust, moisture, small particles. That can lead to slower charging speeds or connection issues. It's not common, but when it happens, it's frustrating. A quick inspection and cleaning once in a while keeps it from becoming a problem. Now, let's move inside the car. At 100,000 miles, the cabin usually tells a story. Airflow is not as strong as it used to be. Maybe there is a slight smell when the air conditioning turns on. That is usually the cabin filters. On some models, especially those with a larger filtration system, the filters can get clogged enough to affect performance. Replacing them is simple, and the difference afterward is noticeable. The airflow improves, the air smells cleaner, and the system does not have to work as hard. It is one of those small things that makes the car feel newer again. There is one more thing I always pay attention to at this mileage: software behavior. Not just updates, but how the car responds. Menus, responsiveness, screen performance. Because even though the hardware is solid, software can start to feel slower over time depending on usage. Most of the time, a full reboot or an update clears that up. But it is worth paying attention to, because it affects how the car feels every day. And unlike most cars, this is something that can actually improve over time. At 100,000 miles, a Tesla isn't at the end of anything. It's just entering a different phase. The big components, the battery, the motors, are usually still strong. What changes is everything around them. Suspension, small electrical parts, maintenance items people ignore. That's what determines whether the car still feels solid or starts to feel worn out. The owners who stay ahead of these things end up with cars that still drive like they did years earlier. The ones who ignore them start chasing problems one after another. So here's what I want to know. If you've owned a Tesla past 100,000 miles, what was the first thing that actually needed attention? Drop it in the comments. I read through them, and they usually point me toward what to cover next. And if you want more real-world Tesla maintenance advice, subscribe. I'll keep sharing what actually shows up in the shop, not just what sounds good online.